Our preference is always Kaizen. So we start with Kaizen, and then when we need Kaikaku, we go, that's sort of a last resort.
ProCognita, Get Agile podcast. Improving knowledge work delivery with Kanban. Interview with Todd Little.
Hi and welcome to Get Agile podcast. Today we have a special edition from the capital of Bangladesh. We are in Dhaka for regional Scrum Gathering Dhaka 2025, and my special guest is a keynote speaker from yesterday, in fact, Todd Little. So we're starting always with two questions. First is, who is Todd?
Okay, who is Todd? So Todd is an accidental agilist. I got involved in, my background is chemical and petroleum engineering, and I was developing software and leading teams developing software for the engineering, for high-end computational sciences, great fun stuff, visualization and all of that. And as I got more and more into management, I went out looking for what's going on in the way people are managing software development. And this is during the 1990s, and during that time, the predominant view was, and the thing they were calling software engineering, didn't look at all like what I was doing as a software developer and managing software development. It didn't even look like what I knew was engineering. So eventually I ended up running into Jim Highsmith, who was at one of the conferences, and I finally found someone who was talking about software very much the way I was thinking of it in terms of complex adaptive systems and dealing with feedback loops. So I got connected to Jim, and then eventually we were at the same time also within our company running conferences. And I was helping organize those conferences, brought Jim in, and I also went to another conference that Jim was involved in, the Cutter Conference. And at that point in time I met Alistair Coburn. And at one bar night, he started showing started talking about a conference he was going to run. And I told him, well, I run conferences, and he got some ideas, and he and I just mind melded, and together we ended up collaborating on building the Agile Development Conference, the first conference of the Agile Alliance, which has now turned out to be the Agile 2000X conference. So I got into the Agile community through that, really, and was practicing Agile. Continued doing what I was doing as an executive in my organizations. Eventually left that and joined Kanban University, and have been the chairman of Kanban University for the last 7 years. So back into that.
Which leads us to the second question: what is Kanban University for those people who don't know?
So Kanban University is the leader in the Kanban method. Kanban University has accredited Kanban trainers that work not for Kanban University, but they're distributed throughout the globe. We have over 300 Kanban trainers that teach people about the Kanban method. So the Kanban system design and Kanban systems improvement, which creates a Kanban management professional. And so the Kanban method is an approach for not just software development, but knowledge work in general. And it's a management method for improving knowledge work delivery through evolutionary change.
Cool. And just before our recording, during the lunch, you said an awesome sentence, which I want to start with. Is you said the ecosystem is designed to make everybody happy. Can you repeat this one, because I will screw up.
So yeah, we're in a situation now, particularly in the Agile space and in Agile training market in particular, and there's lots of things around, Agile is dead, Agile is suffering, and I think that's the reality is Agile has failed in a lot of places. We've sort of done that to ourselves, and then we start blaming, it was all the training company's fault, or it was all the consultants' fault, or whatever. And my point was that, and I discovered this sort of as an outside observer, because I was doing my own things as an executive with the company, but I was observing all the other people that I was working with on the Agile Alliance board and the Agile Leadership Network. They were all looking at, well, how do we, they were all consultants and trainers, and so I was looking from the outside saying, they were various people complaining that, certification is a terrible thing. And I was looking back at it, since I wasn't directly involved, I could look back and I said, well, The reality is that the ecosystem has created this situation, right? We have trainers who want to sell training. And so they package up a 2-day training and say, just take this training and you'll be okay. And then we have the customers who don't understand why they don't work. And they're told that there's 2-day training is going to solve their problem. So they say, oh, give me the 2-day training because we'll be happy. Because we can't spend more than that. So it gets packaged into small chunks. And everybody thinks they're winning. Yet in the end, they have this delay before they lose because they actually didn't get what they needed.
So you get the rewards today, but the bad side is coming, tomorrow.
So they feel good for a while, right? And this has happened throughout, and we've seen the development both on, say, the Scrum training, in fact, even the Kanban University training, and I think then it got really polished up with SAFe training. Unfortunately,
we're not going to go that path today.
Well, the release train is starting to hit some people.
Yeah, that's a wreck train, and yeah, so we end up like having a 2-day training, promising that someone is master after that. On the other hand, if you think about it, like XP said, we're not going to do any training on XP. We're not going to certify. They did the training. We're not going to certify you in the training, which ended up like XP as a forgotten kid of Agile, or forgotten father of Agile, I would say.
Yeah, I think that would be true. I think XP, which has an enormous wealth of tools in XP. In fact, actually, we got, that was actually one of my other connections with Kent Beck early on before the manifesto, and we brought him in to speak. And I really love XP and the rigor of the technical practices, and how it blends well with really everything else. In fact, it blends incredibly well with Kanban. But I think that, and I was involved when we merged the Agile Development Conference with the XP Agile Universe Conference. And the interesting thing in dynamics at that time was that XP was the big player. It had all the buzz around it because the book had come out and it was really getting a lot of buzz. And so the creation of the Agile Development Conference was the brainchild of Alistair, Jim Highsmith, and Ken Schwaber, who were afraid they were getting minimalized in the XP Agile conference. So it got put together. I think that XP then underserved the market need, right, by not creating some mechanism for credibility and reality is XP for a lot of people is really hard.
Yeah, it is.
You have to actually have rigor, and Scrum provided a really nice thing that people could mentally map to. It looked, it's relatively, as Ken Schwaber says, it's easy to understand. It's not necessarily easy to practice.
Yeah, so a friend of mine was saying, like, with all this exponential growth Agile, and at the same time at best you can have a linear growth of XP coaches, people who know how to code, do the software incrementally. And we missed this one. And now what I understand what you're doing is you're trying to address some of this myth we have in a software development. This is your goal, basically. This is my understanding from the conversation. Yes. So let's go into this one. You said during the lunch that you have few of them, so let's go with the first one.
Well, certainly one of the things is, we always get asked the question of, well, when should I use Scrum and when should I use Kanban? And it just keeps irritating because the challenges, and you'll see all these comparisons of Scrum versus Kanban.
Yeah.
And
because they get a lot of likes on LinkedIn.
Yeah, they get people want it. It's a question people have because they don't understand.
And then they want to have a simple question.
They want to have a simple answer.
Complex. So what is your one sentence answer you have?
So the one sentence answer first is, all comparisons that are comparing Scrum to Kanban are wrong.
Okay. So my first answer is I don't care, but yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So first of all, is that they're wrong. I don't necessarily care. The point is that the reason they're wrong is that every one of them will usually have Scrum more or less correct, and then they will take Scrum glasses and try to look at Kanban and say, well, what does it mean? So they're doing a translation interpretation.
So you get a hammer and you hit everything.
So it's the assumption is that there's one versus the other. The versus is the fundamental flaw because they're doing different things. So Scrum is a process framework. So process framework is an incomplete methodology that's intended to fill in the blanks, but there are certain structures to it, and it's a defined process.
Yeah, also fancy name meta framework, meta process, right?
Meta process, something like that.
Yeah.
Kanban is not a process framework. Kanban is an approach for improving knowledge work delivery through evolutionary change. So it's something you apply on top of an existing process. And if that process is currently Scrum, you can apply Kanban on top of that and improve it. And that's the essence of why we've developed a class called Scrum Better with Kanban.
Yeah.
So you start with Scrum. If your existing process is Scrum or even close to Scrum, you can start applying Kanban on top of it to improve it. And we find that's providing, just like Scrum is incomplete in the technical practices that are provided through XP, it's also incomplete in the improvement processes. It's clearly compatible with Inspect and Adapt, but the tools for doing Inspect and Adapt are really not well defined. And in the Kanban world, since it's our foundational element, we have various approaches for improvement that people can use that approach to improve wherever they're at, including starting from Scrum.
All right, so let me dig into this one, because you said, okay, we're starting from what we have, so meet people where they are, basically. Yeah, exactly. This is one of the concepts. Now, if they're doing a great waterfall, we meet them where they are. Aren't we afraid that we end up with the better waterfall?
So that's a possible consideration. What we approach is, no matter what you're doing now, let's start and understand what you do now. Okay. Let's not throw it out entirely, because there may be good reasons why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, you made some business on this one, because if you hire a consultant and you have enough money, you need to have this money from somewhere. So most likely, you're doing pretty good business with the process you have right now at hand, right?
Well, maybe, or maybe you're just doing it because that's what a consultant pushed down you.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Okay, that could be another.
Because I think that's more common, right? The consultant came in and told you should be doing waterfall. So in the 1990s, it was really bad. They had these big stacks of books.
Yeah.
And totally useless, right?
We used to call it rational unified process. now it has a different name. We're not going to mention this one.
Yes, exactly. So there were people making a lot of money selling this very heavyweight waterfall approach. There were also people who wouldn't spend that money and were sort of in a much more chaotic mode, or coding cowboys, or Wild West, whatever. And I think the nice thing about Agile, and particularly I think also about Kanban, is you can start from any place. Right? You can fix those problems. I do think that Scrum did naturally, it was much more of an evolutionary change from people who were starting from a waterfall, because they could shed away things. And they could still do their iteration, and they could still do their planning they were used to, but they just did it in chunks. Now, did they solve their problems? Some did. Some just replicated, just took a big problem and chopped it into chunks, right? So the question is, as we get back to it, is it dangerous that we're starting from a bad place and going to reach a local optimum rather than a global optimum? And there's actually absolutely that's a possibility. Our approach has always been to come in and fully understand what you're doing today. Not what you say you do, but what you're actually doing. Because at least by doing so, it gives us the context to say, well, a few of these things are working. We don't want to break those now. A few other things are not. So there are times where the right answer almost immediately after doing that is to say, we do need a bigger change. We can afford, actually not necessarily we need it, but we're ready for a bigger change. Because it could be they're not ready for the change. So it's a combination of two things. Do they need it, and are they ready for it?
Yeah. And
both of them have to be true in order to take that next step. So there may be some things where they need it, but they need to be prepared to be ready for it.
So yesterday you mentioned like a small changes, like incremental changes, and the big changes in the system, something that would be called like Kaizen and Kaikaku, right?
Yeah.
And now, so do you find like you can discover both with using Kanban, and you can address both using Kanban? So again, to avoid ending up in the better waterfall or whatever.
No,
right?
Absolutely. There are certainly so our preference is always Kaizen. So we start with Kaizen, and then when we need Kaikaku, we go, that's sort of a last resort. Right?
Okay.
So it's only we do it when we know we have to do it.
Okay.
And so the same thing, we treat, so reorganization itself is a big bang event.
Yeah.
Or changing someone's title is a big bang event. It's challenging an identity.
Often for people, yeah.
We do those last.
Yeah.
Right? We start with honoring the current system and discovering it well enough so that we can design it going forward, rather than imposing something that we don't even know if it's there.
Okay. So the sentence that the Kanban is evolutionary, Scrum is revolutionary, you agree with this one, or is like a oversimplification?
I think it's an oversimplification, and I would also say that I would say that the initial, so one of the big challenges I do see with Scrum sort of agile transformations is that it is by design the initial step revolutionary big bang Kaikaku. Right? It is usually involving a reorganization. It is usually involving job title changes.
Yeah.
It is usually involving substantial process change right away. The challenge there's two challenges with that. One is it's a big hit. The other is that it's assuming that this big thing is going to work for us, right? Exactly, perfectly.
So we know how the future should look like.
We know what the future should look like, and we can design the future in advance. And what we have generally done is done a big design up front solution to an agile problem, and we're really not agile in doing that implementation. And whereas the Kanban approach is at least let's evolve it, let's understand it. Now, to get back to the other thing, the other thing is Scrum itself is evolutionary change if it's done right eventually.
Yeah.
Okay, because inspect and adapt is all about evolutionary change. What I see the problem with that is many teams will do the inspect because they're told to do a retrospective. They have real trouble with the adapt.
I heard this inspect and accept is what I heard is being called.
Inspect and bitch.
Yeah. So here's another thought that comes to me. You say, okay, avoid a big change. One of my observations, like we have like a traditional organization, like plan for 5 years ahead, and you do a small changes, then the gravity of the system is so big that you end up with the old behaviors with the new names. So you've seen this one, and how do you address this one?
So you can always have that. You have that even when you try to make a big change.
I know. I know. You just end up with project manager being called a Scrum Master, or whatever, right?
Yeah. I mean, my wife was in organizational development back in the 90s, and we always used to joke that organizational change was coming up with new names and doing the same thing. So that was.
Except someone got a lot of money.
We're changing money first.
We coming to the first sentence. We make everybody happy for a while.
For a while, they get happy because.
And you can update your LinkedIn profile, so that's cool.
Yeah, you get to claim something new skill, whatever, and go, all that. But ultimately, we care about results, right? And to get that result. But to your point, can you have gravity that's so big that it holds back? Obviously, you can. At the same time, we've also had, even though we start with small changes, we've also seen examples where we make small changes and get very big results very quickly, right? So the small changes, usually it will come in the form of too much work in progress.
Okay.
People are overloaded.
Okay.
So everything's getting pushed in the system, and nothing gets out.
Yeah.
Everything gets started, nothing gets finished.
Yeah.
So
everybody's busy.
Yeah. So everybody's busy and nobody's happy, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's used. And it's really, so that type of situation, you can get some substantial results very quickly by cleaning up the system, right, and pulling back. But there's other places where, so like we've got a very good case study from Vanguard Group where they were using Scrum for many years and doing okay, but they'd hit a point where they'd stalled out. They just weren't getting any better.
Okay.
And we had a consultant go in there, work with them, one of the consultants worked with them, and within 90 days, they had improved the lead time by 75%. Nice. And they had increased the throughput by 4 times. And this was really by creating an end-to-end Kanban system and just focus, right? A lot of times just doing doing things that everyone knows to do but haven't been doing can make some huge improvements.
I'm gonna go back to the previous point because you said a work in progress limit. I mean, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
My observation is that the work in progress, the big work in progress, is not because people want to multitask because hey multitasking, but because they have so much work to do and they get blocked with some items. So the best thing, the easiest thing to do is to move to another items. Now, if we don't have a end-to-end teams, which Scrum suggests, and let's say again, we start with this narrow specialization, waterfall-ish, separate componenting, all the stuff, right? So meet them where they are. They get blocked, they have limits, but they don't know what to do. So I know the concept, and I know that it can go different direction. My question is not about theory, but my question is what you've seen happening in action when we say let's limit the work in progress, but we have so many dependencies that people have no idea what to do when they reach the level.
Yeah, so the dependencies is one part. I will give another example because this is a real example I lived in. I was a VP of product development at a company, and I was dependent on the IT group to provide me infrastructure, servers. And so we would put in requests, and there was a period of time where the project manager was just collecting all the requests, and she felt it was her due diligence was to make sure to say, yes, it's been started. And so we'd have 400 items in the queue, and they'd all been started. And you had no visibility to where they were, no indication of what was happening, and no prioritization whatsoever to all of this. And so the company had gone through a shift, and we ended up bringing in a service delivery manager that was serving, and there were 3 of us who were VPs that had a common portfolio. And so we had her set up to run and manage that portfolio, and we said, we're gonna use Kanban on this project, on this, you guys work through a Kanban system, and we're gonna have a 10 whip limit. A maximum 10 that we'd get in. And well, let's just start with that, because we could easily high prioritize our 10 items. And the other thing that was happening would be 400 items in the list. By the time something got done, it wasn't even needed anymore because we'd moved on to something else.
Yeah, the lead time was no longer, the customer was gone.
Yeah, so these were things that were taking maybe a year or longer to get through the system. Unless they were expedited. So what do you do if you needed something? Everything got expedited, which meant only expedited items got done and nothing else got done. So we went instead to a system where we said, no, we're going to focus on a top 10 list, and we just did a simple round robin with the 3 of us to say, well, and one of the guys had a lower limits, a lower need out of his group because he was more of a desktop need rather than the server need. So his was simple, so he took fewer slots when the other 2 of us took the others. We just agreed to it. We had 10 lim, and now we were getting things out in 30 days. And they were the things that were important. So we're going from a year to 30 days, order of magnitude improvement just by, and not by changing anything really other than a focus on the important work and on someone managing the flow. Right? Because what was happening before, we'd go into someone's queue, they didn't know what to do about it. They had no idea what was important.
Basically, they didn't need to take care of this one because they have so many items to do. So I don't need to take care of this one, so I can take the next one. If I cannot do anything about the next one, then I have 50 more to choose from, right?
Yeah. So that one wasn't so much of a dependency issue as much as a delay issue. It's just sitting in queues. It's just waiting in queues.
Yeah. So I see this one, but the dependencies
and so we've ended up doing some taxonomy of types of delays, right? And so sitting in queues is sort of is one of those. Dependencies is another one, right? Is that we have dependencies, and each of these are managed in a different way. Right? The queues, you figure out, well, what can I do to minimize these handoffs and keep the flow going? With dependencies, then you have the question of what can a team do proactively with a dependency, right? One is to actually work collaboratively with who the dependency is and try to figure it out. Another is to have, for both teams to have information about their lead time so that they can actively plan given that you're starting, how long am I going to have before this is available? So there are active techniques that we have within the Kanban method that range from just simply collaboration to something more rigorous, which is potentially using some metrics to help with that. So that's one of the areas. And then the other one we have of a common issue with delay is discovery, right? So we discover something that we had no ability to know in advance. And those are natural. Those are going to happen. We're in knowledge work. The inherent element of knowledge work is there are things that are unknown, and they are unknowable. And you deal with those differently, right? Usually you've already made the decision you're going to do it, and so most of the times you just have to accept that variability. So dealing with variability, we find, and dealing with delay and variability is one of the things we find that many Scrum teams have challenges with because, well, they have no tools. It's not part of it's not part of their 2-day class.
Yeah.
And it's not even part of many extended classes is how to deal with delay. The nice thing about the Kanban method is that we've really identified many of these patterns and have approaches. And so when we developed our class Scrum Better with Kanban, that was one of the things we really focused on. Given we know people are having trouble with predictability, the only way you can get predictable is if you start understanding your delays. Where are your delays coming from? Where are your variability coming from? And then taking proactive steps with it.
Yeah, I would ask a question. The predictability is the most important metrics, but for many components that can be, right? So this can be a problem.
Yeah, I don't think it's the most important. It's one of the biggest pain points.
I think so. But then also, if you end up with having like software working every 30 days, like you said,
yeah.
Most guys say that the predictability is less important because the predictability is important when you have a lead time of 6 months or 6 years. But if you can decide every 30 days or every 2 weeks what is the most important thing, then you don't care much about the predictability anymore.
That can work, although I take a little bit different stance on so a lot of people in the Agile community say, oh, well, the thing about Agile is you go ahead and fix the date and whatever you have, you deliver. I was in product for 40 years.
Yeah.
I was a product manager, and I had to deal with that conflict of, it's a trade-off question. Are my customers going to be happy if I ship them only this much? And many times my answer was, they are more willing to accept the delay in time than the delay in the product. And in fact, I had a really good example for this because we had an executive come in and he said, we've been shipping too many things, we're missing deadlines. So we are going to show that we can hit deadlines. We are going to show that we are innovative. So he created a calendar of innovation. A calendar, every month we would be shipping something.
What could go wrong?
Every month we were going to ship something. And so, you can guess what happened, right? Every month we shipped something. And it was not just one group, it was multiple product lines. Each product line was going to ship on a different date. And they were going to have this innovation. And so what could go wrong? So the thing is, during this time, we had taken a large market share from our competitor. We had customer satisfaction numbers in the 90s. We had product satisfaction in the 90s. So we were making really happy customers. They loved our product. They were living in our product 8 hours a day, right? And sometimes 12 hours a day, because these were people who were really passionate about what they were doing. So they loved our products. We gave them this calendar of innovation, and they started not liking things in the customer advisory board. And so we started asking, well, what do you think about the calendar of innovation? Their response was, oh, you mean crap on time. Not the type of endorsement you want from your customers.
But it seems like, again, it's not about the predictability. All right, since we'll be starting a session here in a few minutes, so as much as I love the conversation, we need to wrap up. Yeah. So the last question, if the people want to learn a little bit more, where do they go?
So a couple of places. One is they can learn more about Kanban from the Kanban University website.
And we're going to put the links under the recordings.
And there's plenty of free resources out there. There's the Kanban the official guide to the Kanban method. There's a number of case studies out there. I mentioned the Vanguard case study. There's also XIT case study from Microsoft, which is a really intriguing one from people that are stuck with the problem of how to deal with estimation. So great resources out there on Kanban University. Also, feel free to contact me, LinkedIn to me, and I will be happy to, if you got a question that came out of this, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to talk to you.
Thank you very much. And if you haven't been to Bangladesh for the Scrum Gathering, then see you next year.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
To learn more, visit procognita.com/getagile.